The Pentagon is a massive symbol of U.S. military power, but after it was hit quite intentionally by a plane on September 11th as a symbolic blow against the U.S., things certainly changed. Joining me now to talk about the days after that attack, a Wethersfield native, a Yukon grad, and a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, Carl I. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Lieutenant Colonel. We do appreciate you taking the time just to give us recollections on what must have been a tough day. And can you just start with the broad brushstrokes of what it was like to arrive on the scene there in the day or days afterwards and just see the devastation?
And I showed up about 90 minutes after the plane went into the building, and I remember getting onto the lawn out front, in front of the hole there, and Pentagon police greeted me and let me come on because I had a government vehicle, and I was walking around looking at all the different scenes and seeing the fire, et cetera. I looked over my shoulder and I saw the highway and people in business suits and business attire jumping in the back of pickup trucks and getting into service vehicles just to get out of Washington, D.C. It was quite a bit of hysteria. People were very, very afraid, obviously.
What was your primary objective when you got there?
I was taking a look at the area where we set up the Tactical Operations Center for my unit, and I was looking at some of the communications aspects of how this might work so we could speak to people across the front lawn and into the hole. As you know, the building is thick concrete, so actually communicating with radios is not easy. I was a communications officer, and I was just surveying the area.
What did it take to try to establish radio communications in that area, given not just the devastation, but all the commotion that was around and ongoing concerns, I imagine, about security?
We had to make sure that everybody was on scene to support the effort, including municipal fire department, the local police, et cetera, could all speak together. So back then, if you remember, the Nextel push the talk radio, that seemed to have the right frequency to put on service members and the professionals who were going into the hole to be able to communicate from inside where the crash had happened back outside to the various command posts.
How much did, before we went on the air, we were talking about how the building was fairly robust, which probably prevented things from being even worse. But on the flip side, I imagine that made communications a little more difficult trying to get through all that reinforced concrete. What kind of a challenge was that?
Like I said, the tactical radio systems that we had for, obviously I'm a soldier in the Army, but as a joint unit, they didn't really work very well. So again, we used those Nextel push to talk. You remember the commercials on the NFL a long time ago, and we had about 200 of those because we just had inauguration recently. So we still had them in our warehouse, and we were able to bring them out, tune them back up, and make them work for everybody on the front lawn there.
I know you mentioned that push to talk. I can still remember that beep, from the double beep from the commercials. Talk to me about the humanity that you saw unfold, the good and the bad. What are some of the lasting images from those days, those weeks out there?
I think the thing that struck me was that young service members that worked with the old guard, conducting burials, ceremonial kind of events, and guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier, were brought down, 19, 20, 21 years old, put in asbestos suits, and after the area was cleared by the fire department and the FBI had done their research and done their forensics in there, those kids put on asbestos suits, grabbed gurneys and body bags, and went into that hole and pulled men and women out who had perished. And one of the stories that came out of that was because of the blow, people were forced in certain directions, and the ones that were forced forward, so to speak, and they actually lifted the bodies to put them into the body bag. The front side, you could see the uniform, the name tag, the decorations, et cetera, in many cases. And that really had quite an effect on some of those young service members that had, a very challenging job of bringing back the remains out of the hole.
I can only imagine. During those times, my understanding is you spent 6 weeks there, just essentially set up on the lawn outside the Pentagon. Is that the case?
Oh yeah, that's accurate. We were there 6 or 8 weeks. Initially, it was every single day for quite some time. I spent 21 straight hours there after I got there, and then I was spending about 16, 18 hours down there every day because fires kept kicking up inside that hole. Fire department locally was on scene, so they kept running in and out, and there was always something going on with regard to media, new people coming on, some people coming to support, providing meals, that kind of thing. So we stayed busy, obviously.
Yeah. How did your time down there end? Was it just one day everything seemed like it wrapped up? Was there any sort of sense of finality or for lack of a better word, closure?
Well, some of the things that nobody came back in that building for quite some time, obviously, but then we started to allow persons to come back into their office when we knew the structure was sound. I can remember quite a few people walking in a regular mood, so to speak, and then realizing the devastation, just really breaking down. I mean, very, very significantly. And I'm not putting them down. I'm just simply saying I was really struck by it all of a sudden hit them. That sort of began the end of where our mission was, because people were allowed back into the building. And then, of course, they cordoned off that particular area. And then we went back to our base over at Fort McNair, and we continued to run operations from there back and forth. But our operational tempo moved back away from the Pentagon because people were going back to work. So that was about the 7 or 8 week mark, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Well, listen, everybody processes trauma differently, especially something that might not even be possible to process given the size and the scope and the terrible nature of what happened. So, Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for taking the time to just give us a little glimpse into what life was like 20 years ago tomorrow and in the 6 to 8 weeks that followed. We do certainly appreciate you taking the time.
Well, God bless our service members in the United States of America. We live in a great country. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for your service. Thank you again.